point that this woman was making. Wait a minute.
I'm meeting with,
Wait a minute.
Marshall.
So she was one who decided not to go.
Oh, so that's a
I'm
really
not going.
important sales pitch.
So anyway,
So maybe we should talk after.
Yeah.
Right.
Because she,
The meeting's about BPS, but I can talk about it.
okay, but that's a great opportunity.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2017. My name is Andre Pa, and this is the Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission. Today, before we get started, I would like to remind everybody to speak into their microphones and project their voice so that we can make sure that everybody hears. And I'll remind you if you're not. So if we can start with that. Our agenda today is items of interest from the Commissioners' Director's Report, consent agenda, consideration of minutes from December 13th, 2016. We'll have a PSC vote for officers. And then we will have the Central City 2035 plan work session, and we'll adjourn. To items of interest from commissioners? No? I have one, and it's just a reminder of Catherine Schultz's memo regarding the DOZA subcommittee. She has appointed Mike Hauk, Gary Oxman, Catherine Schultz, and Eli Spivak, and Teresa St. Martin on the, for a subcommittee around DOZA. And they will be representing us on that subcommittee. That was sent out to everybody, and hopefully you've read it. And there's a schedule there for those committee members.
Mm-hmm.
Joe?
No director's report today, Adam.
Okay. You good? Consent agenda,
Move adoption of the consent agenda?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 We're at a crossroads here because our our person
Our
is
motion maker is not here.
not
so-
here, so.
So let me relate the understanding, and then we can hopefully
Well,
find somebody to make the
Actually, I
motion.
think we'll, go ahead.
So the proposal for the officers is that since we are continuing the commissioners' terms through April to finish the Central City Plan, that we also stick with the same slate of officers until that time. And the person who was going to make that motion is not here right now, so if somebody who's not named in the motion, as both Andre and I are, would be willing to take that.
We have a replacement.
I propose the officers as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Vote, Julie?
For sharing.
Aye.
Yes.
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 Yes. All right, moving on. Yeah, I lost my agenda.
I'm going to say who they are.
Central City 2035 plan. Before we get started, there's been a number of adjustments to the original agenda, and hopefully everybody has that. And we'll ask again, but are there items that people would like to have a discussion on any of the sections today that they would like to add? If not, Sally, get started.
Okay, great. Well, we are very pleased to be before you again for our third work session on Central City 2035. You have a packet in front of you that we sent to you before the new year, and we posted online. So as Andre mentioned, in that packet is an agenda that's slightly out of date. So I've distributed a revised agenda that looks like this, and it's in front of you now. There also are some copies on the back table. Before we get into that, I just want to let you know that we currently have 4 more meetings on the calendar to talk about Central City 35. We have January 24th, where we plan to talk about cost analysis that we're working on right now. We'll bring forward some of the carryover items from today, and we'll probably talk about a few policy amendments and some amendments to our action tables, among other things, on the 24th. That's the draft agenda for that. Mike?
I do have a question. I'm pretty sure I got a note saying the green buildings issues were going to be discussed on the January 24th, not today.
They are, with the exception of one, and that's the low carbon amendment. All the eco roofs, the bird safe, all of that will be discussed on the 24th.
Okay. I just saw green buildings here. Thank you.
You'll also note that there are 2 carryover items there, and that's what eco roofs and, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, on February 14th, we'll be back to talk about some more river-related items and some code related to scenic resources. On the 28th of February, we will bring back some amendments that are based on and stemming from the recently adopted Affordable Housing Code. We've had to look back at Central City 2035, and there's some few things that we need to amend as a result of that. And then finally, we plan, if we can't complete our work on the 28th, we'll come back on April 11th for a final vote. So that's the schedule going forward. So today, we have the items that are before you on the sheet of paper I passed out. Just one quick note is that for the miscellaneous code and map amendments, we have a couple of special guests coming. Director Mike Abate from the Parks Bureau and Jim Owens, who is with the Parks Board, are going to come at some point here. But other than that, it will be staff that you are familiar with. And the first one up is, before I do that, just as we go forward through each one of these, if there are items that you want to talk about or pull for discussion at a future item, let us know. And I believe Commissioner Houck already identified item M1 that you'd like to talk about at a future meeting, but you'll raise it when we get to that item. Okay. So I think we're ready for Mauricio.
All right. So we're going to take on TSP amendments, street classifications and projects. We'll have a presentation and a discussion on item J5.
Hello. Okay, good afternoon. Mauricio Leclerc at PBOT Planning. Glad to be here to discuss the TSP elements of the Central City 2035 plan. I have a very brief presentation that I'll walk you through, centered primarily on the issue J5, the street classification, that Commissioner Smith asked to discuss today with you. So basically, we have a memo, I think it's memo J, summarizing the analysis of the TSP section of the plan, plus the public outreach. We basically received over 400 comments on the TSP. Pretty typical. People care a lot about transportation in the city. Generally, with very strong support for the policies that we've been developing through the quadrant plan work and now this final plan. Many of the comments were about priorities for funding, not necessarily about the projects themselves. Even though they want to say, I strongly support this project, make this happen and so forth. A vast majority of the commenters were for bicycle advocates who wanted to emphasize that they need greater separation from cars on busy streets. And I think the plan reflects that in the way we set up the street network. Also, the amendment packet has technical revisions from the proposed draft that address technical information that we have. We changed some of the project descriptions, the timelines, the costs, based on public feedback on the work that we've done with other bureaus, and new information such as new costing, new feasibility studies. Some things that, some major elements that it was missing from the proposed draft are 4th Avenue bikeway classification. It was classified as a bikeway, but we got strong support that be elevated to a major city bikeway because it really supports long-distance travel from Barber, for example. And then Sandy Boulevard, which I can explain in the map in the analysis that follows. So we also met with Planning Commission officers. So we really appreciate the discussion with Katie and Andre and Chris, and related to some items that are there before you. The budget, we originally, we had a proposed list of projects that exceeded by 10 million the budget that was originally left for the TSP. Basically, when the TSP, citywide TSP was put together, it left a bucket of money for this process to fill in with new projects. So they left us about $47 million. We did a lot of analysis and added projects. We were a bit off. We met the commissioner and we did some of the previous analysis that I said, working with bureaus, doing new costs, and basically we have now a packet with you that basically is under the 47 million that was allocated. So I guess we're fine on that, and appreciate your work on that. We also clarified a bit of the evaluation criteria that led to these projects, and then we had a thorough, as always, conversation with Commissioner Smith about the classifications, particularly the bike classification. And from that conversation, he asked that we discussed this item 11th and 12th. Any comments so far? If not, I hope you can see the map. But basically, on your left, you have the proposed draft. I'm sure this pointer work. Which one? Oh, look at that. Oh, sorry. That's a rookie mistake. From current slide. Okay, thank you. So let's see. 11th and 12th, are the border, the eastern border of the central city, and the border of the central east side. This connect from basically Powell all the way to, basically these streets dead end in the Lloyd district. In the proposed draft, we had them as bikeway, not major city bikeway. I'll go into the definitions in a little bit. The amendment is to bring them to, still be a bicycle classification, but bring them to city bikeway. By the way, this is the classification that's in the proposed bicycle master plan. So basically, we were changing the bicycle master plan. In this case, we are amending it back to be more consistent with the previous one. Okay. So basically, the amendment is closer. It reflects what's in the bicycle master plan and the current bicycle 2030 plan. So, actually, there you go. So basically, why the change? What the definitions do? So basically, our rationale was after hearing public testimony, this generated actually a lot of support. This idea for a bicycle connection in 11th and 12th. At the same time, that it generated some angst in the central east side and also in this neighborhood to the south, the Brooklyn area. What the central east side recommended was not to take it out, but actually to make sure that we do a thorough analysis for the potential impacts and trade-offs. So they were okay with that, with this project as it is, knowing that we will do a lot more analysis before anything gets implemented. So, but upon further analysis internally, we realized that, we went back to the original definitions of major city bikeway and city bikeway. And if you can read this, the major city bikeway is intended to be more of a long distance, higher volume traffic. So words such as backbone, high volumes, directs, seamless, efficient travel across and between multiple districts. So imagine long commute, for example. Whereas city bikeways are more for access to your significant destinations, including access to these major city byways, and provide coverage within the district. So let's see what I have in front of me. So in this case, you can see that we have a classification of major city connection for 7th in this case. It used to be 9th, so going back a little bit in history, our original proposed draft had 9. Sorry, our public draft had 9. Up here in the Central East Side, folks said that it had a conflict with loading, so we moved it to 7, and we added 11th and 12th. Now we're basically keeping it on 7th, but bringing 11th and 12th back to the original proposal of the bicycle master plan. So reading, what does it all mean? Basically, you can see in this graphic that 7th better meets the definition of long distance and direct travel. You can kind of connect, the southeast through the middle, the core of the Central East Side, and then through a new proposed bridge in the vicinity of 7th that is actually funded, and then connect up north and northeast. So it better meets the definition. Whereas 11th and 12th, it just dead ends, for example, in the mall, and it does, kind of dead ends, in, or it doesn't provide the same level of directness and long distance travel. Therefore, based on definition, we're proposing that. Some things to say is that some people confuse major with higher priority or a better facility. It's not intended to be the case. For example, Salmon, it's also a major city bikeway, and basically it's a greenway. It doesn't have much facility at all except some traffic calming, and all the it goes all, but it does go all the way to Mount Tabor, so it does serve that long distance purpose. So that is the reasoning behind it. Commissioner Smith wanted to just air this rationale before you.
So thank you, Mauricio. Before I dive into this question specifically, I just want to talk about the overall set of classifications for Central City. Had several very productive meetings with Mauricio and other PBOT staff, and generally got to a lot of agreement on the Central City bikeways. I think a theme that we saw during the Stage 2 TSP work is beefing up the major city bikeway network, and we gave PBOT homework to do for Stage 3 to examine a number of potential routes in the future to consider as major city bikeways. And I think you'll see here that Salmon has been upgraded within the Central City, I think in anticipation that Salmon will become a major city bikeway outside the Central City as well. I think one place where we were not able to get to, in my mind, a good solution is there's no north-south connection in Goose Hollow as a major city bikeway. You have to get across the freeway before you have a major city bikeway that moves north-south. And I think that's a little bit of a deficiency, but there really wasn't, until we take over 18th, 19th, there wasn't a good street to do that on. And I'm told so far that's not possible, but I hope to live to see the day. So the last thing we were sort of disagreed about was this particular pair, and there's a concern about 7th, and 7th is going to be a great facility going almost all the way to Killingsworth if City Council manages to get some resolve and say it's not going to be on 9th because it belongs on 7th, but we've recommended a through route all the way up to just short of Killingsworth on 7th. And the bridge will be there, so it's going to be an important facility. But it is also the Green Loop. And there is some concern among folks who cycle that whether 7th can be a good facility for people who will be moving at the speeds that Green Loop users will be moving, and accommodate people who are using it for through movement who want to go faster. And can we design a facility that accommodates both those paces of cycling? So 11th and 12th was a little bit of a hedge against that if we need a place for the faster cyclists to move through the district. I am not going to suggest that we change the map, but I did want to air the issue here and make sure the commission was aware of it, that in moving from 9th, really at the behest of the freight community, we've now merged that function with the Green Loop, and the two functions may or may not be compatible, so we have to continue to pay attention to that over time.
Thank you. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I bike these routes daily, 7th, 11th and 12th, and just a vote of confidence for the staff. I think this is a good approach for it. And for me, 7th is good long distance, as you note, and it's probably been noted in some testimony. 11th becomes a little complicated because that's where Hawthorne jogs to get over the bridge. So there's a lot of merging happening on that street that sometimes gets me to want to avoid it, whereas the 7th is a straight cross through it, signals.
All right, so thank you for this. I have one more thing that I forgot to add to the presentation, which is modeling. So basically, before particularly before the FAR conversation, we are supposed to, do the transportation analysis that supports the land use changes. In this case, what affects trips is the FAR, the allocated, building capacity of the district. We send the information to Metro, including the proposed FAR changes in the proposed draft, plus the TSP classifications that can be put into the model, plus some changes such as the parking zoning recommendations, that do affect trips. And basically, long story short, the results are back, and we further analyzed it with our modeler, and we reviewed it with ODOT. We are okay. I mean, ODOT is okay with the analysis. We are comfortable with it, that we can support the FAR changes that are before you in the proposed draft. So that's all.
Other questions for Mauricio around the TSP?
Just a comment, I was pleased to see reference to the green loop throughout the conversation, that it's based on public input and so forth, so I just want to say I'm pleased to see it referred to many times in the document.
Other comments? I would just like to say thank you to Mauricio and his work around the budgeting item of balancing and getting the Central City into their budget. I appreciate that. I know it was hard work, and Chris and I had some conversations, and I appreciate your input in making that happen.
Great, and we
Thanks.
greatly appreciate your help.
Thanks. Other comments? Are we comfortable with this item moving forward except for the carryover of J3? Anybody have any concerns? Okay, we'll move on. Next item, miscellaneous code and map amendments. There's a presentation, discussion items under I-20 and I-28, and carryover items are I-4 and 5.
Oh, I can't read.
Good afternoon. Nicholas Starn with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We have a few items from Table I to discuss, I-20 and I-28. I think item I-28, we're waiting for Parks Bureau staff to come here, so I'm going to do I-20 first, in the interest of time. This is a proposal that stems from a request that we heard from the Park Bureau to require ground floor windows on building facades that face open space. Open spaces in parks, similar to the requirements we currently have and are proposing to bring forward for building facades that face streets. The Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is supportive of this concept. We believe that it will help activate parks and open spaces, improve the pedestrian experience and in the public realm, and increase public safety with more eyes on the park, so to speak. Staff's approach to modifying, to bringing this concept to fruition is to modify the existing ground floor window requirements for streets, which are mapped in the code in map 510.8. So on the slide in front of you, we have the existing proposed draft map as well as proposed amended draft. On the right, we did not have this amended map ready in time for the packet when it went out a few weeks ago. So I've provided an 11 by 17 copy, and that should be in front of you. So the map on the left, the existing ground floor window requirement shows on black lines where we currently require or are proposing to require 60% of the wall area on the ground floor have windows. Everywhere, almost everywhere else in the central city, the requirement is 40% of the facade facing a street have ground floor windows. So these streets that are highlighted here, there's a higher standard, and that's based largely on the street and development character concept that we worked through in Central City 2035, generally civic level retail streets and the transit mall. Staff's proposed revised map on the right, basically just in the gray areas, adds open spaces to that map. So essentially all of the public parks in the city, in the central city. So in those areas, the 60% ground floor window requirement would apply.
Good.
Comments, questions?
Would this be a time to have a conversation about the overall, what's included or not included in the 60 or 40%? Or is that should that be under this topic or a different one?
I think
there's a separate decision item on that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
This
right.
was the bike room
Right, yeah.
windows. That
yeah,
issue?
we'll be we'll be revisiting the two carryover items, I-4 and I-5.
I-5, which are carryover items.
Right, so there'll be another opportunity to discuss ground floor windows, because this is adding another piece onto those requirements, and then I-4 and I-5 are about what qualifies to be behind those windows or not.
Okay. Does that answer your question, or, okay. So we're comfortable with this item?
Yeah.
Okay. Parks here?
I don't believe Director Abate is here yet, so let's move on. If there's nothing else on the miscellaneous code and map amendments that anyone wants to talk about, I think we should move on to green buildings.
Okay. We'll come back to the miscellaneous code item I-28 when the parks officials get here.
Thank you.
What did we just move to?
E.
Why don't we do that? Okay. Sorry. Just a moment, so I don't.
Oh,
Whiplash.
we have parks officials.
Whiplash.
So I think we'll start with Debbie Bischoff to introduce it, and then
Okay.
we'll invite Director Abate to come up.
Okay, great.
Which one is it?
Good afternoon. Oh, is this on? There. Good afternoon, Planning Commission. Debbie Bischoff, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Today, I would like to talk with you about additional uses in the open space zone. The topic was originally scheduled for discussion at your November 16th work session, but was deferred until today. And you can find the content in items I-27 and I-28 on Table I and in Memo I. So this provision implements Central City Plan Big Ideas and the policy framework for activation of public spaces to serve residents, employees, and visitors in a way that enhances the urban environment and balances different goals of livability and vibrancy. We received a variety of public testimony on this particular provision, and it varied. We heard concerns about the extent to which retail structures interfere with the primary role of open spaces and parks for recreation. A concern was raised about development impacts on the floodplain near the river. Others felt retail structures and open spaces are fine, provided there's a maximum limit on the size of these uses. And overall, supporters want to see parks and plazas enlivened with a variety of activities. Okay, so this slide illustrates current regulations, the proposed draft regulations, and a revised recommendation from Parks Board and Park staff that is before you today. Mike Abate, as you know, is here in the audience, and he and Jim Owens, who represents the Parks Board, would like to say a few words after I finish this presentation. The revised recommendation lays out potential for a limited amount of retail on all open space zone properties in Central City. The amount is based on the size of the site. The revised Retail and Open Space Code provides greater flexibility for retail structures. However, it's really unlikely that at every open space site we'll have retail development. Mike can share with you Parks Bureau's approach to retail at city-owned properties and the benefits it can provide to parks users. The code language maintains that retail uses must be desirable to support park users and activate the park. Restaurants, cafes, or recreation-oriented retail are the likely uses that will locate at these open spaces. Public input will happen in parks planning processes and with the ongoing design review requirement to ensure that the public is aware of and can contribute toward a positive outcome. These efforts will also ensure that new development fits in with the park and the local neighborhood context. And that concludes my presentation, so I'd like to bring Mike up. And Jim?
Thanks, Debbie. Good afternoon, Mike Abate, Director of Portland Parks and Recreation. I'm here also with Brett Horner, who's Planning Manager for Parks, and Jim Owens from the Parks Board, our Citizen Volunteer Advisory Committee. So thanks for having us here today, and want to also appreciate BPS staff. This is an issue that we've been working on, I think, in collaboration over the last few months, and really appreciate how constructive the back and forth has been, and I think we're at a very good place. Our Parks Board, and Jim will speak in a second, has really kind of taken the lead in this matter and has given it great consideration. Jim, Patty Tillett, and others were intimately involved in discussions with parks and planning and sustainability staff. So in a nutshell, we're requesting more flexibility for in how and where retail is possible in the central city parks. Because we found that the existing code is very, very restrictive. It's not in alignment with many of our peer agencies all across the country. And this is an issue that is kind of at the forefront of park activation all over the country right now. The ability to have various tools to activate parks is incredibly important, especially in urban settings. And so our preference is we'd like to be able to have as many tools as possible without prohibition. Park use and land use needs are changing, and so flexibility to employ that tool when it's appropriate is important. I also want to mention that the goal is not to put a retail space or a retail activity in every park. As a matter of fact, we don't have any inherent desire to do retail. What we see is that in some cases, retail could be a tool to help activate a park or some sort of commercial use. And the other thing is, I've got no plans in the Bureau that we've identified a park to say, well, hey, we want to put retail here, so let's make sure we get this addressed here. We have no plans. But I'll give you a great example of why we want to have it as an option. So Director Park, if Director Park had been zoned open space, we would not have Elephant's Deli in Director Park. It wouldn't be allowed. It's not one of the 4 in the current code. We have 4 parks that are identified, one of which isn't even a city property, it's federal property, Terry Shrunk Plaza. So being able to say that you could put a retail here to help keep eyes on the park and also give users something to do, and that's what makes Director Park, maybe not today, but most of the time, a good lunchtime spot is a nice activity. I'll also say something I talked about to the Parks Board is that you don't just snap your fingers and retail happens. Retail has to be commercially viable. And for those of you who have been around since Director Park was first built, you know that the first attempt at retail in that space was not successful. It wasn't until Elephants came along that it was able to be a viable business. And so that's one of the things that we want to be very careful about on retail is just, you can't just point to it and say it'll work. It often won't work. So we want to be very, very judicious. Sometimes we want to use non-permanent structures. For example, what we're doing on we call it Block A, the southernmost North Park block, so the block that's just south of Burnside. You know, we went through an RFP process last year to solicit ideas to activate that space because we were having some major challenges in the North Park blocks. And we got a proposal, and we've implemented a proposal that included a lot of site improvements, but food carts on the site. But there were other activities or other things that were proposed that would have used the small buildings that are on the site. They weren't chosen, but I just put that out there as saying that's another example of when you might, because of some conditions, want to use a building or put a building into a park in the central city. As I mentioned, there are many other controls on the use of retail outside the zoning code. And part of that is the economics that I alluded to. But the other is every time we do a park process, there's a very extensive, exhaustive public involvement process that looks at all the things that are going to be proposed. And so there will be lots of opportunities for people to weigh in. The Parks Board has had a specific interest in equity considerations, not wanting to commercialize parks to the point where people who are using the park have to pay to gain an experience. So that's another piece that we would be concerned about. Retail does provide a lot of benefits in certain places, including security, eyes on the park, and all the things that Debbie mentioned. In fact, current code language in section 35.510.115A already speaks to the importance of activation and to help promote downtown as a regional attraction and enhance the central city. And we believe the proposed changes that were up on the chart a second ago are balanced and reasonable and appropriate, and especially given our current very, very restrictive code, and puts us into similar state as San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, Denver, Chicago, Cleveland, where the code allows some retail in given situations. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and then I'll pass it over to Jim, or would you prefer Jim go first?
Just have Jim go.
Okay.
Good afternoon. As Mike indicated, I'm Jim Owens. I'm a member of the Parks Board, and we spent a lot of time on this issue. This was a tough issue for us. We're generally not inclined to promote retail uses in parks, but we wanted to look at the special situation that the Central City represents. You should have a copy of the recommendations from the Parks Board. And there are really two parts to it. One part is some general considerations that we think need to be applied at the front end. And if you can pass that test, then we have recommended some restrictions in terms of size of retail uses based upon the size of the park. The board asked me to stress a couple points in presenting these recommendations to you. First is these recommendations are very limited. They represent what we're recommending solely in the central city. It's not intended to represent Parks Board policy about retail uses outside the central city and parks. Secondly, I mentioned we were challenged in developing these recommendations, and we were challenged between a philosophy that parks are no place for retail uses and a philosophy that we need to make parks work. So we arrived at the recognition that parks in the urban core of the city are different in terms of the functions that they serve, and clientele and many times is different than in other parks in the city. And they're oftentimes very difficult to manage. Mike mentioned that equity was a big consideration for the board, and we looked at it in the context that for many cultures, going to a park entails family and food activities. So many cultures look to having retail opportunities in going to parks, and we thought that's most appropriate in the central city in particular. There's also the equity in terms of safety factor, not only for visitors to the city and users of the parks, but surrounding businesses. Big deal in the central city is that these parks be safe for them. And then we've asked the Bureau to make sure that there's equity in terms of the types of retail uses that are authorized. And we're asking them to go the extra mile to make sure that the operators of those retail uses include, to the extent practical, diverse cultures and underrepresented communities. And then I mentioned our recommendations. The first part are a bunch of considerations, the test really that you have to pass. And what we're suggesting is that any retail use that is to be authorized has to fit the particular park. It really needs to be a good fit. Second, there needs to be a community benefit associated with it. And third is that the retail can't get in the way of other park uses. We don't want a bunch of commercial vehicles or anything, or that type of thing, restricting or inhibiting access to parks. So really, retail can't get in the way of the functioning of the parks. And I'll stop there. I don't know whether Patty Tillett came in. He helped draft these recommendations.
Let's see him.
He was going to talk to mostly to the experience elsewhere in the world that Mike indicated, and multiple examples of parks and urban centers where limited retail activities have really rejuvenated park spaces and made them attractors.
Great. Thank you. Questions? Mike?
I've got several comments. Yeah, this initially, this gave me a lot of heartburn, and I know there was public testimony on it as well. Primarily from the perspective of not the current parks director, not the current board, but down the road, predicting what could happen in the future. And there is a tendency throughout the country to want to fill open spaces. They're out there, there's a space, we need to put this, that, and another thing in it. And the classic example, if you look at the graphic that the Central Park Conservancy put together in New York City, if every use that people said they wanted to put into Central Park had actually been put into Central Park, it would be totally inundated, totally covered with retail and other sorts of impacts. I'm supportive of the current approach. First of all, I did make a note on the side. I said, Parks Board, ? What's the Park Board's position on this? Because I know there would be a lot of robust discussion. I am supportive of this based on the testimony that I've heard from and talking with Mr. Abate in the past. I think it makes sense. I'm glad to hear that we're talking only about the central city at this point. I think when we talk about outside the central city, I was pleased to hear you reference food carts, for example, because there are ways to activate a park with food carts and other non-structural, permanent structural approaches in the parks. And I think, the amount of money, time, blood, sweat, and tears that goes into bringing land into the public sphere, I think we need to really be very, very serious about what that's going to look like in the future. Are we going to start filling it up? Privatization is a big issue at the national level right now, and we need to be very concerned about privatizing public spaces. I think that Director Abadi's comments about a robust public involvement through Portland Parks, and certainly if there's design commission oversight as well, I think we have enough eyes on the potential for parks to make me feel more comfortable than I did initially when I was looking at these code amendments.
Thank you.
Aye.
All right, we got Eli, Michelle.
I am also supportive of this batch of amendments. I would perhaps go further with it, but I would say, as a parent of young kids, it makes a huge difference whether you can get a cup of coffee, a pastry, buy a ticket for a bus ride or a bike without having to cross a street. It allows the park use to extend a lot longer period of time. And I've been visiting some Portland parks, including in the neighborhoods like Wilshire Park, with a friend from Germany, and he asked, where can I get a cup of coffee? And it's like, well, is it 5 blocks that way or 10 blocks this way? And it's astounding to someone from another city that you would not have those amenities, so you can just get that and watch your kids the whole time. So I think it's a great step for Portland. I'm glad the Parks is giving it good oversight because of the commercialization issue. And I could see at some point having, perhaps this is already in the code somewhere, but an opportunity to differentiate between, urban area parks and natural areas. And I actually kind of wonder whether, if we're freeing up some open space zoning for retail, might there still be a conservation overlay on it that says you can't build any structure here that hasn't been needed to date, but it might be needed once you have this allowance in the open space zone? Does that make sense? For example, if you have an open space designation right now, you can't build anything there. Now that you're allowing it to build, perhaps there's outside the central city, Pier Park is a large park where there's clear natural areas. There's also just fields. Is there some overlay that would be able to say zoning would allow you to do retail in one little piece of it, but not the rest of the area? We're not going outside the central city now, so this may be just a topic for other discussion, but it seems like with this change within the central city, any park, there's not a balance on where you could locate things within that park based on conservation value.
We're not talking about hang gliders off the bluff over Oaks Bottom, which has been proposed.
Michelle?
So I'm just curious how I sort of overlay this with Tom McCall Park and Saturday Market. Is that like a festival use? Is that a retail use? What is it?
If I get this wrong, Saturday Market is a temporary use, so it is not, it wouldn't be covered by this. Tom McCall Waterfront Park would be allowed to have some more permanent retail use based on the proposed changes here. But I think the key is, and maybe this goes to Mr. Spiesbach's question as well, is that we do a master plan for a parcel, and if retail was something that was felt to add to the recreational experience, then it's a question of where would that go. Just because it's zoned open space, there's all kinds of things we can build with no limitations, fountains and structures and pavilions and those kinds of things. But this would be that it's really about the use of commercial activity that this code addresses.
Okay, this isn't a planning issue, but does the revenue stay in parks?
Yes, it does. Yeah, we usually, we have many agreements, and they're usually lease agreements of one type or another, and the revenue is about 30% of our annual budget is revenue generated, mostly from fees that you pay to do a swimming lesson or arrange a park for a wedding or those kinds of things.
Other questions? I am very supportive of this. I especially want to call out the idea of the equitable use for all users, because I think it's important that all cultures, all people feel comfortable coming and participating in the parks wherever they are, whether downtown or out in their local community. And I know Parks has a good reputation for ensuring that going to the ownership also of this, so that brings some prosperity back, and I think that's important. So, yeah, I think this is great. I hope that, and I do have a concern like Eli, as you get to some of the bigger parks out into some of the neighborhoods and stuff, that we do kind of think about strategically, how do we preserve some of the land for just that natural purpose of the birds and the trees and the vegetation and the water and wetlands or whatever.
So if I can add one thing there, if we get to the point where we're talking about doing it outside the central city, I have more concerns about stress on the other existing commercial spaces. Just in the central city, I'm less concerned that we're taking energy away from existing commercial spaces. But if we get out, I'm worried the coffee shop across the street is now going to lose all their business because we're in the park.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm very supportive. Are we good with this item? And I guess all of the items on the list?
And my last comment is I really am appreciative of the director coming in and the park board. I think we need to hear from other advisory groups. There was a reference in here, by the way, and having served on the first reconstituted park board after the first one was dissolved in 1913 or whatever. I should know the answer to this, but
He was on the very first Parks Board. He and John Charles Olmsted had coffee.
reconstituted. John and I got along really well. It was referred that the park board is advisory to the Bureau. Is it not also to council?
Yeah, it is to
City council.
director, the Parks Commissioner, and City Council.
Right, thank you. Want to make sure we had that authority.
So are we good for the miscellaneous code map amendments, items I-20 and 28, and we'll carry over items I-4 and I-5? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Director, everybody, for coming and presentation. Appreciate it. We'll move on to green buildings. We'll have a presentation and discussion of item E1. We'll carry over items E3 and E5.
Good afternoon. I'm Rachel Hoy with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And if you could find Table E, or Decision Packet E, that's the green building packet. And thank you, Commissioner Baugh. We will today just be looking at E1, which is the low carbon building standard. And then there are two that are being carried over to January 24th. So this standard on low carbon buildings, we did receive some public testimony on this standard, mostly requesting that we look at other programs. And I guess I should just say the proposed draft, this particular standard is a standard that requires LEED registration at the level of LEED Gold. And so some of the comments were around having us consider some other programs. Why just LEED Gold? And there were several suggestions of other programs that we should consider. So I wanted to just give you that brief introduction. With that, we have Elisa Kane with BPS as well, and I want her to, she's going to walk us through the recommendation and our rationale for a proposed amendment.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Elisa Kane, the Green Building Manager with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So when I was here last, I went over sort of our thinking behind asking people to register for a green building certification, and in that case, it was LEED only. Just to review that a little bit, it was because, one, we have a strong interest in reducing carbon, and we also want to see buildings save resources, save energy, save money, and protect the health of occupants. That was our main rationale for asking buildings to register. I do want to clarify that we are just still asking buildings to register, but based on the feedback we heard both here at the commission level and from the public, we decided to add 3 additional certifications, also well-known in our marketplace, and Earth Advantage being one of them, which is a local nonprofit building certification. They do both multifamily, small commercial. You probably most likely see them on just single-family homes. They're very well entrenched in the new home community. The next one is Green Globes, which is, some of you may have heard of it. It's often referred to as the LEED alternative. It is a local, they have a local organization here, and in fact, they run their national and international programs out of Portland, but it's quite small. And in fact, in Portland, they have very few certifications. There are about 2 downtown. Most of them are major retrofits of buildings. And then lastly, there's the Living Building Challenge, which is probably, if you were to put these on the scale of both aspirations and intent, Living Building Challenge is very far on the ultra conservation, looking at triple net zero, energy, water, waste, everything has to be contained on the building site. We have a couple Living Building PEDAL certified programs or projects here in Portland, including the June Key Delta House is one of the best known ones. We don't have any in downtown right now. We certainly don't have any that are full Living Building Challenge certified, just to give you a little frame of reference. So based on that feedback, we decided to add these certifications and also give us the authority to create admin rules around this so that when and if new certifications come along in the marketplace, we're able to add those more easily than going back to this Central City plan. So with that, I could answer questions or talk more about, we did include this in a memo, so you can see this written up with some of the rationale and basically reflecting those comments.
Questions? Oh, Mike, Michelle?
And this is in reference only to low carbon related issues, right? Because I know that for many other issues, for example, LEED, I know that they moved in the direction of paying much more attention to the impact of buildings on the surrounding environment as well. So I just wanted to make sure this is specific to low carbon.
We feel like all of these represent a comprehensive green building approach, but specifically on energy. So all of these have certain benchmarks that you have to reach on the energy side, but they all include site, so sustainable site development. They include materials, indoor air quality, and their relationship to other projects or other developments, mostly on the transportation side. But that does bring up something that will help in further discussions when these other topics come up. LEED in particular recognizes things like eco-roofs and bird-safe activities as part of its certification process. So if you earn credits in those, it builds towards building a LEED certification.
Right, but also with habitat-related issues in terms of surrounding the building. I think LEED pays much more attention to that than some of these other programs. That's why I wanted to know, we're just talking about low carbon here.
Okay, yes, that's correct, yes.
Michelle?
Were you making a distinction between registration and certification?
Yes.
And if so, can you clarify?
Great question. So in all these cases, you have to register, which basically means that you fill out a small bit of paperwork and usually pay a fee somewhere between $900 $2,500 at time of registration. It can be higher depending on if you're going for expedited, but we'll just leave it about that $900, $2,500 range. That basically just indicates your intent to go pursue the credits that will then get you certification at a later date. And the reason why we as a city have chosen just to land on registration is because for the most part, these have energy requirements that exceed the statewide building code, and we don't have the jurisdiction to be able to require anyone to go beyond the statewide code. So we do feel like registration it shows that there's an intention to pursue certification. And in Central City, I have a lot of faith in the developers in Central City. Since 2008, between 2008 and 2015, 90% of all the new square footage has been LEED certified. So we're seeing this already take traction. What this helps do is, as new developers come online here in Portland, and we're seeing new development firms come to Portland with great interest, especially in the hotel arena, they're not necessarily privy to the sort of way people do development in downtown Portland. So this just keeps it on their radar. It helps them do some due diligence around it. Again, we can just require them to register. We can't require them to go on to certify, but we believe there are a lot of benefits for them to go on to certify. A lot of them are market recognition benefits, and then there's just truly the savings that you will enjoy if you go on to certify and build a higher performing building.
Great. Jeff?
Yeah, I've got a concern about the program. I think I voiced it last time. I think a lot
Jeff,
of people.
if you can speak into the mic.
Excuse me, I'll start over again. I have a concern that was raised last time this issue came up. And I think a lot of the people who testified did, and a couple of things. One is you pointed out the development community, by and large, is already trying to qualify for LEEDs or other low-carbon programs. It's the right thing to do. It's an important marketing tool. So I'm sitting here wondering if we're already successfully capturing most of our development. Why are we now, after we've successfully, from a voluntary basis, had success, now, so my first concern is why regulate it? Why mandate something that's already working in the development community? You mentioned some hotels that might not be. It's hard to imagine a hotel developer not being well aware of what LEED is, what other low-carbon building programs are. So again, I come back to, I'm not sure why the regulatory tool is necessary when we're already achieving success. The other concern I have is these are all private sector businesses that market their certification. So now we're mandating people to pay money to a select group of private sector vendors that the city's choosing. I don't think that's appropriate to mandate, here's the list of private sector vendors you must pay money to. And the third point that gives me great concern is we can't legally require any developer to go through the program. So we're playing this, what to me is a gimmick of saying, pay your money to register a developer, but you don't have to go through it if you don't want to. So we've got a situation now where the large majority of developers are paying their money and going through these programs voluntarily. If there's a holdout or two that for whatever reason doesn't want to go and get certified, and maybe they're building to the exact same standards, they just don't want to pay the money for the marketing benefit of being certified. So now they have to pay money. The city's going to say, pay money to register, but you don't have to go all the way through the program. So I'm not sure what we're gaining in terms of a tangible outcome from this. We already have success. We're now going to force the few developers that don't want certification to pay for something they're not going to use anyways, because we can't make them go through the process. I think this is just an unnecessary regulatory paperwork burden that's just not needed. It's already happening. The marketplace is already taking care of it. So for that reason, I'm not willing to support it. I just don't think we're adding regulation for no real benefit. That's how I view it. And I think a lot of the developers who testified said the same thing. And if we are going to go through it, why don't we, instead of the city listing the private sector vendors that qualify, just say any entity that offers low carbon certification is good enough? Why should we be picking which ones are good enough? I know for many years LEED had a lot of critics. I think they've tailored their program to respond to some of those criticisms. But my point is, I don't think the city should be in the business of certifying private sector vendors that our developers have to go to. I've gone on far enough. I don't think this is appropriate. Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
I had a concern at the last presentation that we were steering all developers to a particular private party vendor lead. And so I would say that that concern, for me, gets addressed by providing multiple options. And there are situations in development where the public sector does require the private sector to work with a limited group of folks. And only so many people in the, deconstruction, for one example. There's 2 firms in town doing it. If you require it, you're going to Lovett or Rebuilding Center. Now, more will pop up, but as a developer, I sometimes find I'm meeting a city requirement with limited options. This falls, to me, in that category, which is much more comfortable than the city saying, you must send all your work to LEED. So I understand the gradations there, and that it would be ideal to not have any indication at all, but I feel that this met my concern.
Michelle?
And I agree on the issue of it feels weird that we're requiring somebody to do something but not following through on it, that we're sort of being creative. And I don't know if we've had any feedback from the city attorney's office on this, but I don't feel completely comfortable with it either, just in terms of we want you to go tell us you're going to do something that we can't tell you have to do. So,
Chris?
To the issue of the named list, have we considered having, instead of naming a list, having a set of criteria for the certification that would be acceptable. So if a fifth one comes along, we don't have to have a legislative action to add it to the list.
Yeah, so I think that the administrative rules would give the bureau director the opportunity to add to the list based on a set of criteria. I think that's how we would set up the admin rules so that we can be more flexible. Some of these may disappear in the next 10 years, 20 years, so we'd want to take them off.
Other comments? I guess I would chime in with Eli. There's plenty of examples in government where government directs developers, contractors, a lot of people to use the private sector, and that private sector is limited. You can argue that's good or bad, and there's a lot of things where I guess government does not regulate a activity, but they encourage it. And I think in this case, we're encouraging an activity. Clearly, we can't regulate it because we can't mandate that they meet a standard or any of these standards, but we can encourage it, and I think registering is encouragement. Trees, we encourage you to just understand what the tree regulations are through, you get a permit. It's very simple, but you get a very simple permit, and it encourages you to understand how to take down your tree. Those are encouragements, and I think we don't have to regulate it. We just need to encourage it, and that's how we got to the building standards and getting people to actually have green buildings in Portland and other cities looking at us. So I think we have that opportunity. So I do support it. I'm encouraged by the administrative rules too, as Chris said, if there's a standard out there and there's 10 other people that want to meet that standard as a regulatory private entity, that they could, I guess, get certified by the city, and if they can charge half the price or whatever, that seems fair to me. Other comments, questions?
I just have to ask you, what is it we're encouraging? Are we encouraging the paperwork of registering when you don't want to get registered, when you don't want to get certified? So everyone's got to register. I mean, what's the goal in your mind then? We're not requiring anyone to design their building in any particular way. We're saying, so that's the goal. I'm trying to understand what we're encouraging, and I'd ask either of you, what's the goal? What are we trying to encourage a developer who does not want to certify for whatever reason? And I've heard developers say they do everything LEED requires. They just don't want to pay the extra $50,000 to $100,000 for the PR benefit of LEED. But the building is substantively the same as LEED. So what are we encouraging with this? And I don't mean to be, I'm just trying to understand, to think through for this and other regulations we get where there's a good idea, but what is the regulation intended to do? And Eli wants to step up and answer.
Well, I don't know if this will answer it. I mean,
I'm
totally hear.
I'm just trying to understand the thought process.
I totally hear your concern, because I've built projects and not gotten certified, because what the heck, I'm doing it anyway. But there are also projects where someone's not certifying because they don't want to institute this complicated regime of environmentally friendly measures on their building. They would not get certified if they applied. And I think that one option the city would have in that case is to create their own certification program, which is a difficult thing for the city to do, or to lean on the work of others to set a higher standard for environmental friendliness of our downtown development, which much of downtown developers are doing anyway. But this is a way of, I guess I see this as a perspective of, does the city want to create its own green building, low carbon building protocol, so that when a downtown developer does the next project, they have to meet city's version and maybe LEED's also because they want certification? Or can city just lean on the work that these other organizations have done, the systems that they've got in place, and not create that bureaucracy in-house? And I see this as a way of kind of outsourcing, to the extent the city's allowed by code, some of the standard setting that these third-party organizations have already been working on for years.
And just to clarify my question, though, we can't require them to comply with these third-party standards because they're outside the state building code. All we can require is fill out a form, pay some money, and then you can throw the form away, and you've met the city code regulation. And I'm just questioning, what is that? So it's a developer, for whatever reason, is not going to go all the way through the process. We're making them go to the front door, knock, hand them the money, and then they can leave. So we're not getting a better building. I don't see. I mean, that's what I'm trying to understand.
I'm just curious, so when you fill out the form, are you signing an affidavit or a declaration that my intent is to do this? What's the registration form?
Yeah, so there is a engagement with the usually nonprofit agency behind that, and then in addition, they will be signing a form. So the developer owner will be signing a letter to BPS that they intend to register and pursue certification. So it's a way to kind of further encourage, I'll use that same word, that they are doing their due diligence to look carefully at the certifications that might actually have a great result for their building for a lot of different reasons, not just the market, but also day-to-day operations, saving energy, saving money, saving water.
So if I sign it and I don't have the intent to go through with it, am I lying on the form?
We would probably have to structure it legally from a perspective that we would not want to put people in that position, that they would be signing that they have registered, that they're in the system with the intent to certify, but we would want to structure it that we weren't on the hook to go back after people if they didn't certify, because that is not what we're asking for them.
But the form is the entity's, not your form.
That's right,
Correct.
yes.
So just a follow-up question, and hopefully this answers it. When you register with one of these entities, do they follow up with their registrant so that, now I gave you whatever the amount of money, do they follow up with them to say, how can we help?
Yes, definitely. There's definitely a value added to that. And some of them are probably a little bit more gracious in the hand-holding that they'll do right from that start. For example, Green Globes, if once you get registered, you get a full suite of support to help your building through the process. LEED, you get access to all their resources and credits once you pay for that. Earth Advantage, it comes with an advisor, an Earth Advantage advisor. So you get somebody who's willing to sit in on your project meetings as well.
Okay.
So that was the best response I've heard in terms of what we're getting. We're getting additional expertise out there to encourage people actually following through. That's what I just heard.
And so the city is basically having a developer have the marketplace help developers in the green building area. And they're encouraging that through the registration and then allowing the marketplace to see if they can actually get that green building at the end of the day. Whether or not they do or not is not a requirement, but it then becomes incumbent upon the marketplace and really that person that you paid to see if their arguments are compelling enough for a developer to utilize their tools.
I think that's a good way of looking at it, yes.
I guess that was my question, is I wanted staff to answer Jeff's question. Why are you requiring that in simple words?
Why are we
Why are you
requiring?
recommending that in simple words?
I just want to make sure I'm getting you correctly, that why are we recommending registration, or why are we recommending
Yeah,
this
why are
whole
we
low carbon building?
why are you recommending registration in one of these organizations, even though they don't necessarily have to completely follow through? So what's the rationale from your point of view?
So there are a couple of things at play. I think we started with the ideal that we would require registration and certification, which is something that the city does for its own buildings. We require that we build to LEED Gold and better. We were advised by the city attorney that we would not be able to do that because many of these, just simply based on their energy requirements, are more stringent than the energy code. So we had to work backwards. And we looked at the landscape of buildings being built in the central city, and we do see a great track record. That average, that 90%. Some years, it's a couple buildings that don't do it, which creates a big dip in our that year's average level of certification. So we have an average of 90% that's happened since 2015, or 2008 to 2015. Some years are 68%. So it all it takes is one building not to certify for us to go like that. This Central City 2035, looking out at what's coming, we do have this sort of ethos in Portland, but I would admit that I think things are changing in Portland too. We do have some of the developers that have been on the ground here for a long time and have done really good work, but we are seeing new development come into town with new money behind them, different intents and what they want to do in the marketplace in terms of not holding on to their building like we have seen in the past where people who build buildings here hold on to them. So we really do want to just put this on the radar, that this is something that's important to the city. We have strong commitments in our climate action plan that we are going to reduce carbon emissions, and the built environment is the #1 source of carbon emissions in Portland. So using the tools that we have at our disposal currently, this may change in 5 years. Maybe we will be able to work with the state to have a variance to be able to require more stringent energy efficiency. But for now, this is what we have. We felt like this encourages that due diligence, it encourages awareness, it encourages these firms, these agencies to go out and be proactive about providing that value-added service. And I know that one of the reasons we added Green Globes is because they said, we are here in this marketplace, we want to help these buildings perform better. We don't think LEED is the only game in town. Help us do this work. So by the city recognizing this one, we may be able to lift up more into the marketplace. So I'll leave it at that.
I really appreciate Jeff's prodding on this because the more and more information is coming out that makes me feel comfortable supporting this, especially the comment, maybe we need to spend more time in Salem to be able to take that next step to require certification. So that's, to me, this has been a very good conversation. Thank you, Jeff.
Other comments and questions? I know we have a couple of people that might be on the fence, so why don't we take a vote on this one? This would be on the green buildings. Everything except for item E3 and E5, which would be carried over. Julie?
So yes means agree with staff.
If you vote yes, you're agreeing for all the other items except for E3 and E5, which will be carried over to the next, whenever that is going to be brought forward again. But agreeing to all the other standards, including the E1, which was just discussed. Julie?
So just to clarify, since I'm obviously not comfortable with the green building certification one, but you've lumped it in with everything, many of the other items that I am comfortable with.
Yes.
We don't need to put them on the spotlight. Can we do a separate little?
Well,
wanna-
I mean,
Oh, okay, well-
Since I think that we're going to pass them, I don't care. I'm not asking for that. I'll vote against it because of my concerns for the lead. And we have 2 more coming up next time, so thank you. If that helps you.
Do you wanna-
This is an informal vote anyway, so.
Yeah.
In other words,
What
if-
was that, a yes or no?
I'm going to vote no because of E1. And if there was a majority to vote no on E1, then we could pull out the rest of the E's that there's probably no objection to it and make it all work as a package.
Well, is there a consensus you want to pull out E1 and vote?
Stay the course.
Okay, all right, keep going, Julie.
Aye.
Marcel,
Yes.
Oxman,
Yes.
Red,
No.
Smith,
Yes.
Febeck,
Yes?
Law.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next.
Next, we have FAR requests, presentation, discussion items K3, K4, and K5. We will carry over K11.
So who's got a dog in this fight?
Good afternoon, Nicholas Starn again.
Staff.
As the chair mentioned, we're working on Packet K, FAR requests, and there's some accompanying maps that go with that. Just as a very brief reminder, FAR is floor area ratio. It's basically the amount of development that is allowed on a site, expressed as the relationship between the square footage of a building and the square footage of the site. We have 3 items checked in the table K for discussion, K3, 4, and 5, all in the south downtown area. And before I jump into describing those proposals, are there any other FAR-related items you anticipate? Okay.
Well, actually, this may be a time for me to interject something. It's not on your list, but we had a discussion at the executive meeting that I went to about taking a closer look at some FAR issues in response to the inclusionary zoning now being a fact. So when we went through this whole Central City plan, we had no idea what was going to happen with inclusionary zoning. It's now in effect, and in my mind, as part of this Central City exercise, we may want to reconsider some of our thinking, particularly around FAR, but some other issues that are impacted by the new IZ regulations. So in terms of Table K, that's not a relevant comment. I just thought since you said the words FAR, that triggered that thought in my mind, and maybe we can come back to this question of, are there IZ-related items we should discuss at the end of if we have more time, at the end of today's work session?
Commissioner, we will talk about the item that you're interested in at a future work session.
Just to add a little bit to the context, what we've discovered is that now that we know how inclusionary zoning is structured, in the Central City, it has different sort of benefits and effects on feasibility depending on your floor area ratio. So we thought it would be, since the objective is to produce as much affordable housing as possible with that, we should take a look and see if that makes us rethink moving from 4 to 1 to 5 to 1. It's that order of magnitude of change. So we'll bring that back.
I have a question. All of these are checked, and reading through the chart, it looks like there were requests made and that those requests are included in staff recommendation. So we're discussing these because somebody's objecting or because they're a significant issue? Just
Well, let me go through it, and I think it'll be clear. So let me just quickly outline the changes and where they're coming from. First, I just want to remind everyone, especially if you were not on the commission during the quadrant planning processes, in general, the proposed draft, the Central City 2035 plan, has very few proposed changes to FAR. That was our general approach. There were, however, some areas, K3 through K5, that are identified in the commentary of the proposed draft where we wanted to look at potential increases in floor area ratio, but we were wanting to wait until we had the results of the transportation modeling for the whole Central City 2035 packet to make sure that there weren't going to be significant negative impacts on the system. And as you heard from Mauricio, we included these FAR requests that or increases that I'm about to describe in that model, and so we're confident that the transportation system can support that. Just to orient you before showing the actual proposals, K3 is basically the area corresponding to the extension of the transit mall to the south, basically from Mill Street all the way down to the river between Broadway and 4th. K4 is the area south of the new Lincoln Street Lincoln Street MAX station along the Orange Line, and K5 is a smaller area, but again, just north of Lincoln Street, adjacent to the new MAX station on Lincoln Street. Here we have two maps, the proposed draft floor area on the left and the proposed amendments to the floor area map on the right. I'll just walk through the three of them, and then we can you can ask questions, we can discuss. The first is K3, again, the South Transit Mall extension. The proposed draft included an increase in the height for this area. So the existing height in this area is 125. The proposed draft includes a proposal for an increase to 460 feet. We are carrying forward a proposal now and there was always discussion that maybe we needed to revisit the FAR to sort of right-size that relationship between height and FAR in this area. And so we heard testimony and requesting an increase in this area to 9-to-1, and so that's the current staff proposal. K4, again, the Lincoln Street Station area, the existing FAR is 2-to-1. The proposed draft proposed increasing it to 4-to-1. We heard a request from Portland State to increase that to 6-to-1, and staff is recommending support for that increase as well. And finally, it is similarly in the area, smaller area to the north. We received some testimony requesting an increase from the proposed drafts 4-to-1 to 6-to-1. Staff supports all these increases. The potential for denser mixed-use development in this area is supported by high levels of transit service and other urban infrastructure. It will help us accommodate the Central City's forecasted share of growth in both jobs and housing in the future. That's it.
Sorry, questions? Concerns?
You had mentioned that in K3, the height, the proposed height is 460. Is that the currently proposed height, or is that an amended height that goes along with the 9-to-1?
That is in the proposed draft. That wasn't an item checked for, that didn't get checked for discussion, but it is in the proposed draft. But it's not existing. So the existing, this is the proposed draft. The existing height is 125. Does that answer your question?
And maybe this is going to be taken up at the time when we bring back the IZ. So the change in the FAR affects the affordable housing component, bonus component, how? Or does that get addressed in your IZ when that comes back?
No, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So they have the height, so now we're changing the FAR. So how does that affect the bonus question relative to affordable housing?
In the 4-to-1 that we were talking about earlier when we bring it back?
So does that?
Oh,
come
no,
back?
absolutely.
If it comes back, I'll wait till then.
Yeah, when it comes back, part of what we'll discuss is the rationale for changing it, how it works within the heights that you've already approved, and making sure that it works. It's a little bit like the discussion I believe we did on the historic districts about whether or not the kind of FARs we're talking about can be utilized within the heights that we've proposed.
And the only thing I would add to that is, so the proposals here, this is an increase to their base FAR. And
Okay.
so if they trigger the inclusionary housing, they would get an additional 3-to-1 on top of that.
On top of that,
Correct.
okay.
But if they don't trigger it, or if they're doing commercial development, the proposed new base would be taking the Southern Transit Mall, it would be 9-to-1 is our proposal.
Okay, and then they would get the bonus on top.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just a process
Michelle?
question. So those are pretty significant increases. So just process-wise, if we go from the proposed and we make a pretty significant change, is that somehow highlighted for the public when it goes to council?
So these proposals, I'm going from the proposed draft to what we're proposing here today with you. These were discussed as part of the proposed draft. It was in our commentary that we were doing modeling at the time, so we didn't reflect that on the proposed draft map. But within the commentary, we laid out these areas and said we need to do the transportation modeling first to make sure that it can be accommodated. Does that answer your question? I mean, there will be additional opportunity to discuss these items, of course, when this goes to council.
Can you speak into your mic?
I was just wondering, in terms of the public, if there's any sort of heads up.
Commissioner, we do plan, just as we did between the discussion draft and the proposed draft, we do plan to prepare a summary of the various changes that we made, and we post that on the website and distribute that.
And I would just add that we did hear quite a bit of testimony when we were talking about the heights in this area. So I believe there's a substantial community of folks that are tracking this and thinking about both the heights and the FAR together. So I think this will be on a lot of people's radar.
Other questions? Are we comfortable with the height and FAR adjustments? Except for K11, which will be carried over? Okay. I guess we're in support of. We'll move on to zoning requests. We have a presentation, and there's no discussion items.
All right, I'm Troy Doss, Senior Planner, Central City Team, BPS. As I noted, I'll just give you a quick overview of what these requests were. I don't believe anyone's pulled these for conversation, but there were 7. There were 2 on the Central East side. They were, show them very quickly. One was for the MLK Grand Corridor area. It was a request to go from the existing IG1 zoning to EX. We recommend maintaining the IG1. The second in the Central East side is a similar request to go from, the proposal in this case is to go from IH to EX. The request is to allow for a housing as a conditional use in this area. We do not propose to do that, in part because we did that in the OMSI area because that was retaining an existing use they had in the OMSI area. But that ability never existed in this IH area, so we recommend against that. Besides, this area is still surrounded by some heavy industrial uses, and we think housing would be a poor choice in this location. The remaining would be, this is one in downtown where the recommendation is to go from RX to CX. The request, though, is can we retain the RX? We've chosen to not suggest that and to go forward with CX. And there's a couple of requests like this in this packet. And one thing I'd point out to you, there was a memo on the back of this packet here that shows an analysis that we conducted that really looked at how much housing are we actually getting from RX versus CX versus EX. And we have found that over the 27 years that we've had the zoning pattern that we're actually producing far more housing in CX and EX than we actually do in the RX zones. So we are proposing to go to CX in this location. This is one where the zoning isn't so much changing, but there has been around Providence Park, there has been a residential required overlay zone. We've typically pulled that back from most places. We've also found that it hasn't been as productive as it could be, and that by not having it, the flexibility that the base zone affords typically produces housing without that requirement. So we're recommending removing that requirement in this location. And the request was to retain that by the neighborhood. This is a slightly different request. This is in the Lloyd District between Broadway and Schuyler. There was a request to go from the proposed CX zoning, which actually exists there today, to a CM configuration from the mixed-use zone project. We recommend against that because that zoning, although is similar to the CX that we have here, there's complexities with trying to implement a non-central city zone inside the central city in this fashion. And then the remaining 2, this is another request to go from IG1 to EX. This would be a spot zone in this case in the lower Albina area. We propose maintaining the IG1 zoning. This site is going to be completely surrounded by IG zoning. We would like to maintain that zoning pattern here and that integrity. And then lastly, this is an area in the West End where we had proposed going from RX to CX. Again, we feel confident that the CX will produce a fair amount of housing and allow for more flexibility that does encourage growth of housing and mixed-use development. The current zoning is RX. There was a request to maintain that RX. We would propose, though, that we continue on with rezoning this area to CX.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the end of my presentation.
Questions? Jeff?
I have a question, Troy. I'm looking at your chart showing, our housing productivity in Central City going back 2, 3, 4 years. How are we tracking with our goal for quantity of housing units, both the city's goal and the metro projection?
Doing very well. We exceed it in some locations, we're matching or on pace in other districts. So for instance, I'm pretty familiar with Central East Side because we just did the Southeast Quadrant plan there. When we started that plan, it had 960 units. Today, there's about 1,400 that are being under development. Our projection for 2035 was a housing growth of 3,000 units. So we're doing very well. Housing is still a hot market right now in the Central City.
A curiosity question. I was clear from the memo that the CX produces more residential housing than the RX. Why?
There's probably a number of reasons. One of them is I think there's an attraction by the development community to go to a zone that has less encumbrance on it. If you have an RX zone, you have very strict requirements in terms of how much ground floor retail or other uses you can do in there. I think the CX and EX sites, just because there's no such limitations, they become more attractive to investment. We've seen a lot of development in those areas, and that's without necessarily having urban renewal being a factor in it or having overlay zones that require housing being a factor in it. And again, I'd point you to the Central East Side where you have pure EX development, and it's producing in the last 5 years, there's about 150% growth in housing in that area, in that zone alone. We just are not seeing that same amount of zoning in the RX zones.
And Troy, just to follow up on that, and it's not the location necessarily, the RX zone. So my question is, so EX is producing more housing than RX, and you think that's a regulatory factor that's driving that more so than the location of RX versus EX?
Yeah, because it exists in various districts. I would say, other than the Central East Side, I would say RX has existed in the Lloyd. It's existed in the West End, downtown, and Goose Hollow. We've had similar types of tools that would prefer housing over other uses like the overlay zones that have been applied historically. Most of them are gone now. We still find that where those encumbrances aren't located, the flexibility just produces more residential development. I think it's just psychology associated with it with the development community. I couldn't easily quantify it, but when we go back over the numbers, and we're going back to basically the implementation of the Central City Plan. So since 1990, we can demonstrate where that housing has occurred. Number of projects, number of housing units. So we're seeing more housing projects in the CX and EX zones, and we are seeing higher density of housing per project in those zones as well. And it has really no correlation with the amount of height or FAR available, because in some cases the RX is exceeding the base entitlements even in the Pearl, but we're still producing in that zone, EX zone, more housing for one reason or another.
Well, let me ask you just a broad policy question since we're having the discussion. Why, if we're getting more of what we want as a city in terms of housing productivity in the CX and the RX, and so we're favoring rezoning some of these properties, why do we need, what's the benefit of keeping an RX? Why wouldn't we just say, RX, you can do what CX does?
Going forward, I would say that there's a benefit in keeping it if you want to have housing being the sole development product that occurs in an area. So there are some parts of the West End and there are some parts of Goose Hollow where they would prefer that to be the primary land use that's there. If you allowed for CX or EX in those locations, you could see commercial development, and you would see, that is a potential conflict in that regard. So
That's on the
maintaining that.
assumption that there's this desire to put commercial on every residential building.
That's true, but
We used
I
to
would say.
force you to do commercial because not enough buildings were doing commercial.
I would say, though, that there is no lack of mixed-use zoning that allows commercial development in Central City today, so rezoning it for that purpose would be a solution in search of a problem.
Since this isn't our topic, I'll ask one last question. What are these regulations in the RX that you think are discouraging or impeding development? And I guess my question would be, are they regulations, one, what are the regulations that you feel are discouraging to some developers? And two, why are they there? What are they accomplishing? What's the public benefit of the regulation?
Well, I think it's trying to retain a primarily residential area, so it does allow for some ground floor retail and some office development as part of it, but very small amounts. So what we have found in the Pearl, for instance, is the housing typically was following the amenities, and sometimes we see these cycles where there's residential and then there's office, and there's residential and there's office, and they're kind of building off each other because they're providing amenities that attract both employees and residents. I would say there's some areas, though, where you want it to be primarily a residential community, and if that's the case, the RX zone's very effective for that because it keeps out those other uses. So it may take longer for those areas to fill in, and quite honestly, we don't have as much RX zoning left in the central city. So those areas are a little more pinpointed and strategically located in our current proposal, and I think that's fine to maintain those that way. But those other areas, when you start looking at the area we talked about along Broadway, the areas here in the north end of the west end, these are areas that have a very vibrant mix of uses already. So maintaining the RX zone in some ways creates non-conforming uses as well. So this is an area where switching over, it isn't going to dramatically change the direction of that area. It's not going from a purely residential to a commercial area anyway. There are some areas that are fairly more developed with residential uses, and those areas it may make sense to maintain that RX zone.
So the only difference is the use. There's not other density or other kind of regular, so it's simply a use difference. It's not the regulations themselves and how the buildings have to be built or look.
Primarily, yes, it's primarily a use issue.
Thank you.
Other questions, concerns? Zoning requests, are we comfortable with supporting that going forward? Yes. Okay, we're supportive. Next item, miscellaneous river amendments. There's a presentation. This is decision table M, and there's no discussion items.
And Andre, I'm going to recuse myself from this
Okay.
discussion.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mindy Brooks with Planning and Sustainability. We're looking again at decision packet M, and there's a memo attached that's zoning code chapter 33475 attached to that. So just a quick reminder, this is the geography that we're talking about with chapter 33475. So it's the river overlay zone. The orange is the general overlay zone, and the green is the river environmental. And we don't have any items for discussion today, but I did just want to explain what's in the memo in front of you. Rather than relying on the discussion table, we thought it would be easier for people to look at all of the amendments in context of the code itself. So the code has two different colors in it. There are gray highlighted text. Those are amendments that we discussed at the last work session, and we got general approval of, and so we put those in. And then the yellow are the amendments that correspond with decision table M. And we're just asking tonight for the general support of all of the amendments in that code section. And just really quickly, this is a summary of some of the major changes that we made. We amended an exemption for maintenance and repair of existing structures, an exemption for adding soil amendments when you're installing landscaping, clarifications for landscaping in the E-zone, clarifications for river-related uses, and then there's lots of typos and number changes and all that stuff throughout as well. So with that, I'll just stop, and if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions, comments? Mike?
Well, actually, I do have one. M1. and this is one that I brought up to staff before and expressed some concern. In fact, I wrote okay, but in ellipsis after it. You know, this one, I understand there is some difference of opinion between the Bureau of Environmental Services and BPS staff, and so I would, as with I think the trail issue, what I would appreciate is BPS and BS getting together and coming back on this particular one. This is the only one that I will call out. And the reason being, and I raised this with staff earlier, is that I understand that the existing regulations allow for replacement of existing structures, but existing regulations don't necessarily make sense in the future. And by that I mean, here we have an opportunity where if there are changes being made, there's an opportunity to upgrade, to I guess, take care of issues that 20 or 30 years ago when those piers or docks or whatever were put in were not addressed. So I would just appreciate some more, I guess, clarity from BES and BPS on this particular item.
Okay, we can bring it back.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Okay, we'll pull that one.
And then the only other comment I guess I make on this whole package is that there are comments throughout regarding the 50-foot setback. And it's acknowledged that based on the science that is, in my opinion, below the bare minimum to actually improve environmental conditions on the river. The statements are that however, in the central city, we have limited opportunity to expand that zone. I'm still very concerned about that, but my main concern is that we're very clear, and staff has made this statement, that what we're doing in the central city will not necessarily apply, particularly with regard to the setback in the south reach and the north reach. And I just want that to be very publicly acknowledged because we have lots of opportunities in the south reach and north reach that we don't in the central city with regard to the setback.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And just to clarify, you're pulling M1 for further discussion?
Yes, I'm asking staff to get together, just as we did with the trails when we asked staff to get together with Portland Parks and come back with some additional information regarding M1.
Okay.
Further discussion? Questions?
And considering, if you've read through this, having one comment on the absolutely thickest, most complicated set of codes, I think speaks well of staff.
Thank you.
And the work that they've done to reconcile many issues before coming to this point, for which I'm very appreciative.
Thanks.
Thank you. So are we supportive of decision table M except for M1, which will be pulled and brought back? Yes, we're supportive.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last item, tree amendments, decision table N. There are no discussion items.
Hello. So my name is Jeff Cottle, and I have been working on some of the tree code items before. I was here just a few weeks ago, so thanks for having me again. I related to recap a couple weeks ago. So today we're really, as the commissioner, the chair mentioned, we don't have anything for discussion, but we wanted to give you a sense of a review of the approach that we use, the methodology we use related to developing the tree canopy target. So today we will go through very briefly the steps that we took, the considerations we made, provide some of the a summary of some of the results in terms of the actual targets that we've established, because we do have those by subdistrict, and then a review of some of the testimony that we have received thus far. One thing to note is that the tree canopy targets are actually adopted by resolution, so they are non-binding. They simply just set a framework for as we move forward over the next 20 years what we hope to achieve related to tree canopy in the central city. So there are already a couple of plans that have been adopted that set a similar sort of target and structure for tree canopy within the city as a whole, and in some cases specifically the central city. So the Urban Forestry Management Plan, which was adopted back in 2004, does have canopy targets for specific use types and for the right-of-way. That is expected to be updated in the next few years. I think the actual timing of it is still to be determined. And then the Portland Plan, which was adopted in 2012, actually did establish targets for 33% canopy citywide, and then 10 to 15% canopy within the central city and also in industrial areas. You see that there's also a target for residential, which is 20 to 25%. So for this effort, we actually did quite a robust analysis for it using GIS, and also fortuitously had some updated LiDAR data, which really allowed us to get a little bit more detail in terms of existing tree canopy. So that's sort of our starting baseline, what is existing. The targets that we prepared were really looking at various policies that are and programs that are in the Central City 2035 plan, or that there are some that we are proposing sort of additional components to increase tree canopy within the Central City. The methodology that we used was really in partnership with Portland Parks and Rec, BES, and then also PBOT in terms of all of the different considerations, as you'll see in a few slides. Oh, no, it's this slide. So these are all the components that we evaluated. So we would like to think it was a rather comprehensive approach to sort of estimating our future tree canopy within reasonable bounds, so that we tried to be, our assumptions, to make sure our assumptions were appropriate and reasonable moving forward based on current and projected sort of future conditions. So through these different components, so the development of BLI is the buildable land inventory, and so really looking at the redevelopment of sites that have already been identified, and that's a big piece of the outcome. And then other components, street trees, unique streetscape improvements, building setbacks and how tree canopy might be accommodated in there. And then the Central City has a unique master plan code, so we had some assumptions on that. And then basically parks and some open spaces along the river. Key drivers that were kind of came out of this process, really looking at what is the future development piece, so the development of those vacant and underutilized parcels, investment in street tree planting, which is currently BES is actively involved in, but the assumption is we would increase that a little bit as a part of the Central City 2035 plan. And then parks is another component related to increasing, although at a relatively small amount, but increasing tree canopy within the Central City. So this is the take home. So as I said, we evaluated each individual district, sub-district separately. And you're probably wondering why we have these ranges. So some of the considerations that we made, such as amount of landscaping that we could expect, or riverbank enhancement, we had some ranges that we thought were reasonable, and thus those have been incorporated into these the different assumptions that we've made. Overall, you can see that we are projected, the target is to at least meet or exceed from either a low to a high estimate, the targets that are existing in the Portland plan. You also might notice that there is some variability amongst the different sub-districts. You can see large increases in the Pearl District and the South Waterfront, and that's largely as a result of the assumption of what were recently planted trees growing to maturity over the life of the plan. And then some of the lower performing districts, Central East Side and Lower Albina, are really, it's an artifact of the types of development that are there. So the industrial and other employment lands that are there that are hard to accommodate additional tree canopy. So some highlights, and then I'll answer any other questions you might have from whether in the table there. So a couple of kind of process questions that we had. There was a request to monitor progress toward our targets, which we did assume we would do, but we didn't actually include a specific action item. So as you'll see from N1 on the table, there is a specific action to, it's N2, to actually evaluate progress on a 5-year basis to make sure that we're making progress toward the long-term targets. Additionally, there was a handful of comments related to the approach that we used and whether it was adequately aspirational and really took into effect more the environmental health and ecosystem services approach as a starting point. And we are interested in doing that at this, especially with the timetable and with the methodology to support that kind of approach is still to be developed. And I think as we move forward, especially with urban forestry growth management plan and those things, it is something that we want to investigate further. But right now, what we did is try to be, again, reasonable and understand where our constraints and opportunities are within the central city to get reasonable targets for this plan. There were a number of requests related to how we are dealing with the streetscape and increasing trees along the right-of-way. So things like requiring setbacks and additional soil within the rights-of-way. We are only requiring a setback along the park blocks at this point. We do have some optional approaches to setbacks for developers if they would like to utilize them. We are encouraging the addition of soil to provide for larger trees, but again, not requiring them. Utility vaults has become a much more significant issue in the central city because as we build bigger buildings, the developer there's more of an interest in putting the utility within the right-of-way, and the city has just in July of 2016 established a program for that to lease those areas. Prior to that, there wasn't existence. So we understand that those are conflicts that are part of this development. And all of these components here are going to be addressed in an effort that's going on right now that is really going based on the urban design frameworks for the different street typologies that we are currently in the process of moving forward with to try to find the balance between all of these different considerations. And then finally, we have a few more items that were raised that came up in a couple of different couple of different groups. And so the master plan code and the tree requirement in there, we will address that as part of the master plan code amendments. And then also we have a separate discussion related to bonuses and other incentives. And so we'll also address trees as part of that. And that's on the 24th. So I'm hoping I can answer any questions if you have them.
Great. Questions, Mike?
Again, more comments. First of all, I support all this predicated on the comments that the Urban Forest Management Plan is an opportunity to address a lot of these issues. I'm particularly pleased to see the 5-year evaluation put in here. We definitely need to track. I think anything less than that, we're not likely to actually be able to observe change over time, but I think every 5 years is probably reasonable. Pleased to hear that BPS will be working with others to look again at the right-of-way and opportunities for increasing the tree canopy even in the central city. And then under number N6, this is just a huge policy issue that I'm hopeful we can really get more aggressive with. And I know that there are national standards that regarding what is considered capital investments need to be addressed, and trees need to be recognized as legitimate capital expenditures. And that, I think, will help drive the city to think more creatively in terms of how do we go about protecting these trees and managing these trees over time. There's a huge issue out there with regard to private property owners and requiring folks, and we put quite a lot of money into managing 2 trees in the the street right away, this median strip, what's that called, the planting strip. And we've been able to do that, but it is a burden for some folks. And I'm hopeful that we can figure out ways in the future after being able to actually capitalize as green infrastructure the trees, then we can talk about, you know, the management over time in terms of what's the city's responsibility versus private property owners. So I'm glad to see that as a recommendation. I know that it didn't get changed, the proposed draft, but it's something we need to pay attention to. And I think maybe through the urban forest management plan, that might be an opportunity to address the capitalization of trees.
Yeah, and there actually is an action to evaluate creative approaches to maintenance and sort of management of trees in the right-of-way, et cetera. And one of those that's specifically identified as a public-private partnership approach, and that was something that we did hear from folks. Again, I think it's just working out the details of how that might work and all of the costs that would be associated from the city
I think
side.
that's an N8. So,
yeah.
I'm good.
Other comments, questions? I had just a question on your table. The south waterfront seemed extremely low, and concerning that it's going to be built out, it seemed to land in terms of the range in the middle of your table for downtown, and I would have thought it would be at the high end, given that it has a lot of green space to then take up, and you've got more flexibility than it's truly green land at a lot of it still, versus a built environment that you're trying to shoehorn to
Yeah,
speak.
I think that's a result. If you look, it's actually one of the largest ranges. So it goes from as low as 14 to 26. And I think that's a result of some of the uncertainty of what the development will look like in terms of landscape, the amount of landscaping that is provided on these there are large parcels that are going to be redeveloped. So I think it's basically sort of a little bit more a representation of uncertainty of what those look like in terms of how that spread is so large, rather than specifically about the south waterfront.
Okay.
And what's interesting about that, though, is if you look at South Waterfront now, all of the trees that were planted in front of the current existing development are willows that are not going to grow intentionally because of the concern over blocking views to the river, are not going to provide that large canopy that we would like to see citywide. So the actual ecological function or the functionality of that canopy is going to be much less than if there were trees that are going to produce large canopy.
Other questions? No, are we supportive of the package?
Yeah.
Gary, I'm sorry?
Kind of building on that theme, I'm less concerned about the width of range than I am about the south waterfront and Pearl falling well below even the lower estimate of those ranges. And what is that attributable to? And since tree canopy is a very slow-growing entity, what can we do in the shorter run to get that in the pathway to be corrected?
Well, for the south waterfront, they have sort of their own design, and all the criteria that apply in the south waterfront are unique in terms of the actual development of that area. In terms of, I think one of the issues that you see is that south waterfront is starting as a relatively low position as compared to other districts. So, and it is similarly to the Pearl District. In terms of what can be done in the short term, I mean, what we hear a lot from folks related to a lot of the tree regulations is the current exemption on tree density and tree preservation for commercial, industrial, and employment lands. So those are actually currently, they are exempt from the tree code requirements. So that is something that is brought up frequently as a way to, depending, it's very much dependent on the mix of the zones that you have in a given area, but those will limit, because there is no requirement to preserve trees or
provide trees in those zones, that you could see a significant difference if you were to change that requirement earlier. We don't have any plan right now to change that requirement.
And I'm glad I didn't bring it up, but I'm glad you did. I'm under the impression that Title 11, additional work will be done in the future on Title 11 as well, which provides us an opportunity to correct that.
Yeah, and as a result of
At least
this
address
effort, we hear larger questions that we have amassed a list of things, of issues that have come up related to Title 11, and I think that is something that, would more effectively be addressed citywide rather than specifically just in the central city.
So Mike, we should look forward to the trees versus jobs debate. That'll be a good one.
Look forward to it.
Other questions? We're supportive. Great. You want to wrap up, Sally?
Thank you very much. We're finished early, and we'll see you again on the 24th. As I mentioned, we'll have a number of topics queued up for you then as well. Some of the carryover items, the green building items, likely some of the TSP and some other things. So we'll see you on the 24th.
Great. And with that, we, just one more thing to remind you, Catherine Schultz will be the chair going forward. And with that, we are adjourned.